So let's share my screen. Here we are. Yes. Okay, so there are so many interesting talks today, and some of them are very technical. I felt that since UX is quite new in the game industry, much more mature definitely in other industry, in the mainstream industry, it's important to define who is the UX designer in the game industry and why you might want to be one of us. Oh. So I'm the lead user experience designer in the racing team at Natural Motion Games, which is a Zynga company. I have more than 10 years experience as a researcher, consultant, now designer and contractor in the mainstream and game industry. My educational background is social science and human-computer interaction. So first of all, let's start from the definition of the discipline. What is user experience design? There is a lot of misconception. And even if you see job titles, sometimes it's very confusing. So also it's a type of profession in the hype. So you will find so many courses that promise you to become a user experience designer in 30 days or with a workshop in 5 days, maybe. So essentially, it is the process to create products and services that provide meaningful and relevant experience to the users. And we are going to break this down. It's part of the wider human-computer interaction world, which is a kind of merging point between many disciplines. Traditionally, it has been born in the computer science and ergonomics, but today it includes art, it includes social science, so psychology, sociology, computer science, obviously, and many other disciplines like industrial design sometimes, or product design, self-design. And what do? So basically, in order to build meaningful and relevant experience to the users, we investigate on who the user is, what are their motivation, their values, their view, what they do. So we work on functionalities, features, and we do it through designing for accessibility, aesthetics, usability, engagement, fun, and so on and so forth. So in game industry, the discipline is meant to design an experience, well, to facilitate an experience. You cannot really design experience until you don't see how the experience is works for your user, but we facilitate experience in the direction of what we meant the user to feel and play the game as designers and developers intended to. And that's very important because especially in other industry, when you say I'm a user experience in game, they say, oh, but user experience make everything easier. That's not really true. I mean, it's definitely true, maybe if you work in the financial services where you have to facilitate the experience from point A to point B and help the user to reach a goal. But if the goal is to build a fun and challenging experience for the player, we are not making the experience easier. We are making the experience like seamless in the way it is intended to. So we are not helping the players to achieve the goal, definitely, but we are building the tools in the gameplay, for instance, to allow the player to achieve the goal or to understand the objectives they have. And we can use even what is in the main industries called dark patterns to make it more difficult, for instance. So that's very important. And we make it without compromising the usability, so the understandability of the game, the learnability of the mechanic, for instance, the findability of element, and so on and so forth. So that is a very important definition. So in many job descriptions, you will find UX/UI. So UI is definitely a part of the UX world, but it's not the central part. So if we think about the UX like the analysis of problems, issues, opportunities, experience we want to build, and UI as one of the solutions that address the objectives that we find, you will realize that UI is just a final part of the work, maybe sometimes, but they're at the moment they're used interchangeably in the industry, which is fine because the discipline is very new. So UX in general has been born in 1995. Donald Norman was the first person putting it as a job description in his business card. And in game industry is very, very recent. It started with main companies, with user researcher, which are dedicated only to the first part of the design, so the research and maybe the testing, while UX goes through a wider process. We are, I'd say, compared to researcher, more generalist. So user experience, let's see what's the main difference between UX and UI. First of all, let's start with the name, user experience design and user interface design. So experience design is applied to physical and digital worlds. So if you design a game that has also tangible touch points, you will be designing those as well. It includes the whole experience, so even before start. So when I say first contact is where the player get to know that the game exists, for instance, hasn't used it yet. Creates the journey through the product or service, taking into account user need, context of use, type of user profile, the pain point, the objectives they want to achieve, the internal drives they have. So the result is user delightment through efficiency and effectiveness, because we are building the intended experience in the best way possible, hopefully. User interface design is more related to the art. And obviously, I mean, these are 20-minute talks, it's very reductive, but in general, is related to creation of a color palette, pattern. They are tied to the visual touch points. They design everything the player interacts with. While user experience talks also to the backend to make something happen in terms of output in the game, or modifying some variables that affect the system status of a specific screen and stuff like that. While the specialty of user interface designer is, okay, once we have the user experience requirement, they decide what is the best way to approach in terms of interaction, the player in the player-facing interface. So the result for them is user delightment through aesthetic. And also it applies to efficiency and effectiveness, because if the point of interaction are well designed, the player wouldn't even notice that. So a good design is the design that is not perceived, actually. So the player gets into the game flow, gets so into the game, they don't realize they are even using the game in a way. So just again, to simplify it, so the user experience designer know the user, know their needs, they design the user flow. So what are the objectives, how the player achieves these objectives starting from a specific point in time in the game, the motivation. So we talk about internal and external motivation. So internal are like, an example of internal motivation is the will to express myself. And you can see many games that allow customization, for instance. And the external motivation is the rewards. So grinding, for instance, to get more currency so I can achieve a specific goal I'm looking for to achieve in the game. User experience, I work on the product touch point. So again, even before the experience starts. And the context of use. So who is the user, in what context they act. So for instance, if we have, I mean, it's very tricky because in Europe compared to Asia, the many games are oriented to a specific target, which is male especially, while in Asia there is more orientation toward also the female kind of market. So the context of use sometimes change, depend on the age group change, or if you are talking to, addressing that to students because your video game is about educational purposes. So you need to consider the context of user that define the user in itself and their ability to play your game. While the user interface designer goes through aesthetic, art direction, of course, is very important, interaction, branding, and the UI implementation, of course. So what user interface designers do is also implementing the prefab in Unity or in the engine of choice. And this is something that sometimes the UX designers don't do simply because we don't have the time to do it. We have a different mindset. Both jobs are very interesting. They're just different, and we're very close. We work a lot together. I personally talk to the UI artist every day, and that's very important to me. And sometimes their feedback change our user experience requirements. So it's not only a one direction communication, even if sometimes, even if most of the time UX design comes before the user interface specs. So who is the user experience designer then? So we try to build a special connection with the player, and let's go deeper into these things. So, as a user experience designer, we design, test, and iterate the game, obviously in collaboration with other people that we're going to see later. And simplified, we do it through research, design, playtest, and iteration. And obviously, later we will see there is an ecosystem. We work with other professionals, so we're not the center of the universe, even if it might look like in this representation. The very important thing we do and what makes us special is that we try to understand and analyze the players. And we do trying to understand their motivation, and as I said, internal and external motivation, emotions, game flow, how we can bring the player into the game flow, how the user can fun, get entertained, lose the track of time, just really experience what the game is meant for them. And then we try, so the final goal is to build this relationship, is this interaction between game and player that provide a constant feedback and interaction between them. So the game responds and the story in the game evolves thanks to this interaction, and the player get into the game more and more often. So this is like engagement. And if you look at it from a business perspective, is retention. So how does the magic happen? So obviously we don't work in a silo, but let's talk about our very simplified set of tools. So the most important part of our job is the research part, research and playtest. And this is what makes us different from the UI artists, which are dedicated to the beauty, the aesthetic experience of the game. So we are more in the functional side and the cognitive side, if you want. So why I will never stop stressing about that. Research is so important. And even if you have in your company a consumer inside, a marketing team that does it for you, the user experience designer is very important to feed the objective, the learning objective from the experiment you are setting, for instance. From the researcher setting, you feed the objective like, we want to know for this specific aspect, this and this and this, or you can feed them with assumptions that you want to verify, because assumptions in the end of the day are assumptions, are not certified knowledge, proven knowledge with that are able to lead us to informed decision. So research is very important, depending on the size of the company and the maturity of the organization, or the maturity, the UX maturity within the organization. You will do your research, or you will collaborate with the proper department, so the user researcher department, the consumer insight department, the data analytics, if you're doing some tracking for a live games, for instance. Whether you're doing it or not, research is a massive part of your job. Playtest is the other one. So we know, we all game companies, we do research, but what I found out is that sometimes the playtest is kind of biased. So many times we do quick and dirty, which is totally fine because you just want to validate quick things, and that's super fine. But we need to be aware that when you do playtest, there are proper playtest and quick and dirty playtest, and you need to take the results consequently as that. So that's a very important skill of the user experience designer, to help leading playtest, feeding playtest, helping to set the protocol for the testing. So my favorite, for instance, is a think aloud protocol for the usability test, because you get to know what the player is thinking and how the player is approaching. Yeah, so I mean, I'm not saying that you will be owning as a user experience designer the playtest, because it's very important that the rest of the team is free to do it, but certainly you can dictate like good practices for the playtesting, for instance. And then obviously the design part is where, as user experience designer, we design the design system, we design the information architecture, the user flow, the specs for specific features, the wireframes that will help the UI artist to work faster and to break down the requirements easier. for them and for the coders as well. And we work in an ecosystem. So the ecosystem we work with, and this is very simplified again because many people are not appearing, is we work with our research partners, which are consumer insight and data analytics, or user research department, naming change, but basically you use consumer insight is who does the user research part. Data analytics is more like the technical part, like tracking behavior. The design partners obviously are game designer and the art team. So from art direction to UI artist. Sometimes we talk to environment artists, depend on the game again. Business, obviously very important. It would be nice to say that in a magic world, we design the best experience ever, but we need to take into account as UX people, the business objective for the company. So we talk a lot with the product manager or business analyst, however they are called in your company. And then obviously our implementation partners, which are production and developers. So it's very exciting because as user experience designer, you get to talk to so many people and you get to learn from so many people. So what do you need to be a UX designer? The skill set ranges from the discipline of human-computer interaction. As I said earlier, is the meeting point between many other disciplines. Cognitive science, human factor and ergonomics are the traditional ones. Interaction design is more recent, but comes from, let's say, is the applied discipline of the academic discipline of HCI. And product and industrial design. Obviously, there are people that come from art. There are people that come from computer science, and they get learning the skills through their work. So sometimes you get to know one specific skill, and then you start building your skill set with experience. The skill set goes from research, obviously, qualitative and quantitative. So from building the research protocol, doing the proper investigation, run the test, getting to know, understand the data analysis. Either if you do it or not, you need to work with that. Analytical skills are very important because once you have data, it's not enough. You need to translate them into design action and UX strategy. Obviously, design. So as user experience designer, we build scenarios of use. We build the information architecture, user flows, user experience spec for features, wireframes to inform the UI artists, and so on and so forth. Technical understanding, because you get to know a lot with engineers. And obviously you need to review your design decision according to technical limitation, dependencies, or platform-specific constraints. And then an agile attitude and iterativity. You need to iterate all the time. You need to collaborate with all the other disciplines. And the agile attitude is the ability not to get too much in love with what you have produced. If you have to throw it away because it is proven it doesn't work, or the cost benefit of producing is not worth, then that's it. And that's the agile attitude. So that's very important. Love of our ideas is the worst enemy of designers in general. So why you want that I'm ending, and I'm aware I have 2 minutes, so I apologize if I'm talking fast. Why you might want to be a UX designer? Well, first of all, it's exciting. If you have this kind of attitude about you love the psychological side of video games, we are like the kind of the human factor psychologist of the team. You are an empathetic person and you are curious about people, then you want to know more about players and you want to design experience that suit the specific players. That's fantastic. You get to talk to a wide range of people. Not range, sorry. I see the error there. From design to implementation, and you get to learn so much from them. You can influence game design and you can propose features. So the role of a UX, sometimes your feet go a bit into the game design, a bit you go into the UI design, so you can propose feature to them. So if you like to be in the middle of this discipline, that's the best place where to be. You get to talk to real users. So if you like testing, if you like to get the energy of your players, transform that into requirements, design better experience for them, design the fun. So that's the best for you. So, and that's the end of my talk. Thank you very much. I see there is some questions in the panel. I'm going to reply, and I'm going to put my email address in there. So if you have any question, I'm very happy to help students that want to get into the path of user experience, because we need more of you in the industry. So thank you very much.